All right, friends. Chapter 11. We're almost there. Only 30 pages left, and then you're done this book forever. Okay, so remember, Paul just came back from the hospital. He's going back to the front. We're going to see what happens. Left his friend Albert Crop behind, but I mean, that's just part of war, so he accepts it and moves on. Okay, chapter 11. We count the weeks no more. It was winter when I came up, and when the shells exploded, the frozen clods of earth were just as dangerous as the fragments. Now the trees are green again. Our life alternates between billets and the front. We have grown almost accustomed to it. War is a cause of death like cancer and tuberculosis, like influenza and dysentery. The deaths are merely more frequent, more varied, and terrible. Our thoughts are clay. They are molded with the changes of the days. We are resting, they are good. Under fire, they are dead. Fields of craters within and without. Everyone is so, not only ourselves here. The things that existed before are no longer valid, and one practically knows them no more. Distinctions, breeding, education are changed, are almost blotted out and hardly recognizable any longer. Sometimes they give an advantage for profiting by a situation, but they also bring consequences along with them, in that they arouse prejudices which have to be overcome. As though formerly we were coins of different provinces, and now we are melted down and all bear the same stamp. To rediscover the old distinctions, the metal itself must be tested. First we are soldiers, and afterwards, in a strange and shamefaced fashion, individual men as well. It is a great brotherhood which adds something of the good fellowship of the folk song, of the feeling of solidarity of convicts, and of desperate loyalty to one another, of men condemned to death, to a condition of life arising out of the mists of danger, out of the tension and forlornness of death, seeking in a wholly unpathetic way a fleeting enjoyment of the hours as they come. If one wants to appraise it, it is at once heroic and banal. But who wants to do that? It is this, for example, that makes Theoden spoon down his ham and pea soup in such a tearing haste when an enemy attack is reported, simply because he cannot be sure that in an hour's time he will be alive. We have discussed it at length, whether it is right or not to do so. Cat condemns it because he says a man has to reckon with the possibility of an abdominal wound that is much more dangerous in a full stomach than an empty one. Such things are real problems. They are serious matters to us. They cannot be otherwise. Here, on the borders of death, life follows an amazingly simple course. It is limited to what is most necessary. All else lies buried in gloomy sleep. And that besides our primitiveness and our survival. Were we more subtly differentiated, we must long since have gone mad, have deserted, or have fallen. As in a polar expedition, every expression of life must serve only the preservation of existence. It is absolutely focused on that. All else is banished because it would consume energies unnecessarily. That is the only way to save ourselves. The quiet hours, when the puzzling reflection of former days, like a blurred mirror, projects beyond me the figure of my present existence, I often sit over against myself as before a stranger, wonder how the unnameable active principle that calls itself to life has adapted itself even to this form. All other expressions lie in a winter sleep. Life is simply one continual watch against the menace of death. It has transformed us into unthinking animals in order to give us the weapon of instinct. It has reinforced us with dullness so that we do not go to pieces before the horror. Which would overwhelm us if we had clear, conscious thought. It has awakened in us the sense of comradeship so that we escape the abyss of solitude. It has lent us the indifference of wild creatures, so that in spite of it all, we perceive the positive in every moment, stored up as a reserve against the onslaught of nothingness. Thus, we live a closed, hard existence of the utmost superficiality, and rarely does an incident strike out as a spark. But then, unexpectedly, a flame of grievous and terrible yearning flares up. Those are the dangerous moments. They show us that adjustment is only artificial, that it is not simple rest, but sharpest struggle for the rest. In the outward form of our life, we are hardly distinguishable from bushmen, but whereas the latter can be so always, because they are so truly, and at best may develop further by exertion of their spiritual forces, with us it is the reverse. Our inner forces are not exerted toward regeneration, but toward degradation. The bushmen are primitive, and naturally so, but we are primitive in an artificial sense, and by virtue of the utmost effort. And at night, waking out of a dream, overwhelmed and bewitched by the crowding apparitions, a man perceives with alarm how slight is the support, how thin the boundary that divides him from the darkness. We are little flames, poorly sheltered by frail walls, against the storm of dissolution and madness, in which we flicker and sometimes almost go out. Then the muffled roars of the battle becomes a ring that encircles us. We creep in upon ourselves, and with big eyes stare into the night. Our only comfort is the steady breathing of our comrades, sleep, and thus we wait for the morning. Okay, so that's a lot for 3 pages, right? Like, you're kind of like, what the hell is going on? I don't understand any of this. What's Paul saying? Essentially, all that's summed up is the fact that they are no longer individuals. They are so worn down by this war. It's become so monotonous, so horrific, so hard that they can't even really begin to comprehend the emotional trauma that they're going through, that they're literally withdrawing into themselves and becoming just survivalists. They're going to do what they have to do to survive and not worry about anything else. Education, you don't need it. High, lofty thoughts, you don't need them. You only need to know how to sleep, how to eat, how to fight, and how to survive. All you need to know, right? When a person lives like that, with that very primitive, basic survival instinct, doesn't have things like education, like manners, things like morals disappear, right? You can't have morals when you're fighting in this war because otherwise you wouldn't do it. So that's what Paul's saying is like we're the only way we're surviving this is if we act like animals and we become animalistic and we become primitive, right? We go back to our very base instincts and only use those to guide our decisions and our actions. That's the only way that we're going to survive this war. Okay. I know it's a little confusing. If you get stuck here, email me and I will go over it with you, I promise. Okay. That's the essence of what he's saying. Okay. Every day and every hour, every shell and every death cuts deep into this thin support, and the years waste it rapidly. I see how it is already gradually breaking down around me. There's the mad story of dinnering. So now it's going to be an example, right? So what happens when you don't have the survival instinct and you do start to go crazy because the war is so horrible? He was one of those who kept himself to himself. His misfortune was that he saw a cherry tree in the garden. We were just coming back from the front line, and at a turning of the road near our billets, marvelous in the morning twilight, stood this cherry tree before us. It had no leaves, but was one white mass of blossom. In the evening, Dittering was not to be seen. Then at last he came back and had a couple of branches of cherry blossom in his hand. We made fun of him and asked whether he was going to a wedding. He made no answer, but lay down on his bed. During the night I heard him making a noise. He seemed to be packing. I sensed something amiss and went over to him. He made out it was nothing, and I said to him, "Don't do anything silly, Dittering." "Ugh, why, it's merely that I can't sleep." "Why did you pick the cherry branches for?" "Surely I could pick a cherry blossom if I want to," he replied evasively. And after a while, "I have a big orchard with cherry trees at home. When they're in blossom from the hayloft, they look like one single sheet, so white. It is just the time." "Perhaps you will get to leave soon. You may even be sent back as a farmer." He nodded, but he was far away. When these peasants are excited, they have a curious expression, a mixture of cow and yearning God, half stupid and half rapt. In order to turn him away from his thoughts, I asked him for a piece of bread. He gave it to me without a murmur. That was suspicious, for he is usually tight-fisted. So I stayed awake. Nothing happened. In the morning, he was as usual. Apparently, he had noticed that I had been watching him, but the second morning he was gone. I noticed it, but said nothing, in order to give him time. He might perhaps get through. Various fellows have already gotten to Holland, so he's trying to escape. He's trying to, ditch the army and run, which is a crime. And if you do that, what happens, especially back in World War I, is they would shoot you. By a firing squad. You were not allowed to desert the army. It was the biggest crime you could do. But at roll call, he was missed. A week after we heard he had been caught by the field generals, those despicable military police. He had headed toward Germany. That was hopeless, of course. Of course, he did everything else just as idiotically. Anyone might have known that his flight was only homesickness and a momentary aberration. But what does a court-martial 100 miles behind the front line know about it? We have heard nothing more of Dittering. But sometimes it broke out in other ways, this danger, these pent-up things. It's from an overheated boiler. It would be enough to tell how Berger met his end. Berger? I don't know how to pronounce that, sorry. Our trenches have now for some time been shot to pieces, and we have formed an elastic line. There is practically no longer any proper trench warfare. But attack and counterattack of which backwards and forwards there remains a broken line and a bitter struggle from crater to crater. The front line has been penetrated, and everywhere small groups have established themselves. The fight is carried on from the clusters of shell holes. So they're the wars at this point in time, it's probably close to 1918, maybe even in 1918, and things are really falling apart. The Germans are not winning. They're struggling to stay in this war. We are in a crater. The English are coming down obliquely. They are turning our flank and working in behind us. We are surrounded. It is not easy to surrender. Fog and smoke hang over us. No one would recognize that we wanted to give ourselves up. Perhaps we don't want to. A man doesn't even know himself at such moments. We hear the explosions of the hand grenades coming towards us. A machine gun swoops over the semicircle in front of us. cooling water evaporates. We hastily pass around the case. Every man pisses in it, and thus we again have water and are able to continue firing. But behind us, the attack crashes ever nearer. A few minutes and we are lost. Then at closest range, a second machine gun bursts out. It is set up in a crater alongside us. Berger has fetched it, and now the counterattack comes over from behind. We are set free and make contact with the rear. Afterwards, as we lie in comparatively good cover, one of the food carriers reports that a couple of 100 yards distant there lies a wounded messenger dog. Where is Berger? The other describes the place to him. Berger goes off to either to fetch the beast in or to shoot it. 6 months ago, he would not have cared. He would have been reasonable. We try to prevent him, and as he goes off grimly, all we can say is, "You're mad," and let him go. For these cases of frontline madness become dangerous if one is not able to fling the man to the ground and hold him fast. Berger is 6 feet and the most powerful man in the company. He's absolutely mad, so crazy, right? For he has to pass through the barrage. So he has to go without shooting. He's going to go do something with his dog. But this lightning lowers somewhere above us has struck him and made him demented. It affects others so that they begin to rave, to run away. There is one man who even tried to dig himself into the ground with hands, feet, and teeth. It is true, such things are often simulated, but the pretense itself is a symptom. Berger, who means to finish up the dog, is carried away with the wound in the pelvis. One of the fellows who carries him gets a bullet in the leg while doing it. Mueller is dead. Someone shot him point blank in the stomach with a very light. Lived for half an hour, quite conscious and in terrible pain. Before he died, he handed over his pocketbook to me, bequeathed me his boots, the same that he had inherited from Kemmeridge. I wear them, for they fit me quite well. After Maitiad will get them, but I have promised them to him. We have been able to bury Mueller, but he is not likely to remain long undisturbed. Our lines are falling back. There are too many fresh English and American regiments over there. There's too much corned beef and white wheat and bread, too many new guns, too many airplanes. We are emaciated and starved. Our food is bad and mixed up with so much substitute stuff that it makes us ill. The factory owners in Germany have grown wealthy. Dysentery dissolves their bowels. The latrine poles are always densely crowded. The people at home ought to be shown these gray, yellow, miserable, wasted faces here, these bent figures from whose bodies the colic wrings out the blood, and who, with lips trembling and distorted with pain, grin at one another and say, "It's not much sense pulling up one's trousers again." Our artillery is fired out. It has too few shells. The barrels are so worn that they shoot uncertainly, and they scatter so widely as to even fall on ourselves. We have too few horses. Our fresh troops are anemic boys in need of rest who cannot carry a pack but merely know how to die. By thousands. They understand nothing about warfare. They simply go on and let themselves be shot down. A single flyer routed 2 companies of them for a joke, just as they came fresh from the train before they had ever heard of such a thing as cover. Germany ought to be empty soon, says Cat. We've given up hope that someday an end may come. We never think so far. A man can stop a bullet and be killed. He can get wounded, and then the hospitals is a stop. There, if they do not amputate him, he sooner or later falls into the hands of one of those staff surgeons who, with the war service cross in his buttonhole, says to him, "What, one leg a bit short? If you have any pluck, you don't need to run at the front. The man is A1. Dismiss." Cat tells a story that has traveled the whole length of the front from the Vosges, I can't say that right, Vosges to Flanders. Of the staff surgeon who reads the names on the list, and when a man comes before him without looking up, says, "A1, we need soldiers up here." A fellow with a wooden leg comes up before him, and the staff surgeon says, "A1, and then Cat raises his voice. The fellow says to him, "I already have a wooden leg, but when I go back again and they shoot off my head, then I'll get a wooden head made and become a staff surgeon." This answer tickles us all immediately. So what's happening is Germany is literally struggling to fight this war. They don't have enough ammunition. They don't have enough food. They don't have enough soldiers. The doctors are literally just like sending people back up to the front who are not qualified to be fighting. They're in a mess, right? And all the boys are kind of like realizing this and, with bitter irony are saying this is ridiculous. There may be good doctors, and there are, lots of them. All the same, every soldier, sometime during his hundreds of inspections, falls into the clutches of one of these countless hero grabbers who pride themselves on changing as many C3s and B3s into possible A1s. Right, so they're tending to take these people that are not qualified to fight, that shouldn't fight because they have amputated limbs, and saying, "Nope, you're fine, go fight." It's bad. There are many such stories. They are mostly far more bitter. All the same, they have nothing to do with mutiny or lead swinging. They are merely honest and call a thing by its name. But there is a very great deal of fraud, injustice, and baseness in the army. It is nothing that regiment after regiment returns again and again to the ever more hopeless struggle, that attack follows attack along the weakening, retreating, crumbling line. For mockery, the tanks have become a terrible weapon. Armored, they come rolling on in the long lines, more than anything else embody for us the horror of war. We do not see the guns that bombard. So the English and the Americans and the French, they had the tanks first. And they would unroll them on the Germans. And if you're a literal soldier in the trenches and you see this huge chain coming at you, game over, right? We do not see the guns that bombard us. The attacking lines of the enemy infantry are men like ourselves. But these tanks are machines. Their caterpillars run on as endless as the war. They are annihilation. They roll without feeling into the craters and climb up again without stopping. A fleet of roaring, smoke-belching armor-clads, invulnerable steel beasts squashing the dead and the wounded. We shrivel up in our thin skin before them, against their colossal weight. Our arms are sticks of straw, and our hand grenades matches. Shells, gas clouds, and flotillas of tanks shattering, corroding death. Dysentery, influenza, typhus, scalding, choking death. Trenches, hospitals, a common grave. There are no other possibilities. So now there's just so many ways to die in this point. Like, the tone of this chapter is very bleak, right? Like, the Germans are losing, and they're losing poorly, but they're still having to fight, and the soldiers know it. And one attacker, company commander, Bertink, falls. He was one of those superb frontline officers who are foremost in every hot place. He's with us for 2 years without being wounded, so that something had to happen in the end. We occupy a crater and get surrounded. The stink of petroleum or oil blows across with fumes of powder. 2 fellows with a flamethrower are seen. One carries a tin on his back, the other has the hose in his hands from which the fire spouts. They get so near that they can reach us. We are done for. We cannot retreat yet. We open fire on them, but they work nearer and things begin to look bad. Bertrand is lying in the hole with us. When he sees that we cannot hit them because under the sharp fire we have to think too much about keeping under cover, he takes a rifle, crawls out of the hole, and lying down, propped on his elbows, he takes aim. He fires. The same moment, a bullet smacks into him. They've got him. Still he lies and aims again. Once he shifts and again takes aim. At last the rifle cracks. Berchink lets the gun drop and says, "Good," and slips back into the hole. The hindermost of the 2 flamethrowers is hit. He falls. The hose slips away from the other fellow. The fire squirts about on all sides, and the man burns. Berchink has a chest wound. After a while, a fragment smashes away his chin. The same fragment has sufficient force to tear open Lear's hip. Lear groans as he supports himself on his arm. He bleeds quickly. No one can help him. Like an emptying tube, after a couple minutes, he collapses. What use is it to him now that he was such a good mathematician in school? Bitter irony, right? The months pass by. The summer of 1918 is the most bloody and the most terrible. Now remember, this is the last year of the war. It ends in 1918. The days stand like angels in blue and gold, incomprehensible above the ring of annihilation. Every man here knows that we are losing the war. Not much is said about it. We are falling back. We will not be able to attack again after this big offensive. We have no more men and no more ammunition. Still, the campaign goes on. The dying goes on. Summer of 1918. Never has life in its niggardliness seemed to us so desirable as now. The red poppies in the meadows round our billets, the smooth beetles and the blades of grass, the warm evenings in the cool, dim rooms, the black, mysterious trees of the twilight, the stars and the flowing waters, dreams and long sleep. Oh, life, life, life. Summer of 1918. Never was so much silently suffered as in the moment when we depart once again from the front line. Wild, tormenting rumors of an armistice and peace are in the air. They lay hold on our hearts and make the return to the front harder than ever. Summer of 1918. Never was life in the line more bitter and full of horror than in the hours of the bombardment, when the blanched faces lie in the dirt and the hands clutch at the one thought, no, not now, not now at the last moment. Summer of 1918. Breath of hope that sweeps over the scorched fields. Raging fever of impatience, of disappointment, of the most agonizing terror of death. Incident question. Why? Why do they make an end? And why do these rumors of the end fly about? There's so many airmen here. So in the summer of 1918, right, they're getting like all these rumors that the war is going to end, that they're going to find peace, that things are going to come to a conclusion. But, I mean, it doesn't happen, right? It doesn't happen until November. But they're hearing these rumors now, and the fact that they have to go and fight, and they're hearing these things, it becomes a lot harder to go out and fight. There are so many airmen here, and they are so sure of themselves that they give chase to single individuals just as though they were hares. For every one German plane, there come at least 5 English and American. For one hungry, wretched German soldier, come 5 of the enemy, fresh and fit. For one German army loaf, there are 50 tins of canned beef over there. We are not beaten, for as soldiers we are better and more experienced. We are simply crushed and driven back by overwhelming superior forces. Behind us lay rainy weeks, gray sky, gray fluid earth, gray dying. If we go out, the rain at once soaks through our overcoat and clothing. We remain wet all the time we are in line. We never get dry. Those who will wear high boots tie sandbags around the top so that the mud does not pour in so fast. The rifles are caked, the uniforms caked, everything is fluid and dissolved. The earth is one dripping, soaked, oily mass in which lie yellow pools with red spirals, streams of blood, and into which the dead, wounded, and survivors slowly sink down. The storm lashes us. Out of the confusion of gray and yellow, the hail of splinters whips forth the childlike cries of the wounded. In the night, shattered life groans painfully into the silence. Our hands are earth, our bodies clay, and our eyes pools of rain. We do not know whether we still live. Then the heat sinks heavily into our shoal holes like jellyfish. Moist and oppressive, and on one of these late summer days, while bringing up food, Cat falls. We two are alone. I bind up his wound. His shin seems to be smashed. It has got the bone. Cat groans desperately. At last, just at the last. I comfort him. Who knows how long this mess will go on yet? Now you are saved. The wound begins to bleed fast. Cat cannot be left by himself while I try to find a stretcher. Anyway, I don't know of a stretcher bearer's post in the neighborhood. Cat's not very heavy, so I take him up on my back and start off to the dressing station with him. Twice we rest. He suffers acutely on the way. We do not speak much. I've opened the collar of my tunic and breathe heavily. I sweat, and my face is swollen with the strain of carrying. All the same, I urge him to let us go on, for the place is dangerous. So we go on again, Cat. Must Paul. Then come. I raise him. He stands on the uninjured leg and supports himself against a tree. I take the wounded leg carefully. Then he gives a jump, and I take the knee of the leg, sound leg, also under my arm. The going is more difficult. So, Cat got shot in the shin. He's hurt. Paul can't find a stretcher anywhere, so he just has to carry Cat over his shoulder like an army crop. Whoops. Like an army carry. Okay. The going is more difficult. Often the shell whistles across. I go as quickly as I can, for the blood from Cat's wound drips to the ground. We cannot shelter ourselves properly for the explosions. Before we can take cover, the danger is all over. We lie down in a small hole to wait till the shelling is over. I give Cat some tea from my water bottle. We smoke a cigarette. Well, Cat, I say gloomily, we are going to be separated at last. He's silent and looks at me. Do you remember, Cat, how we commandeered the goose, and how you brought me out of the barrage when I was still a young recruit and was wounded for the first time? I cried then, Cat. That was almost 3 years ago. He nods. The anguish of solitude rises up in me. When Cat is taken away, I will not have one friend left. Cat, in any case, we must see one another again, if it is peacetime before you come back. Do you think I will be marked A1 again with this leg? He asks bitterly. But the rest of it will get better. The joint is quite sound, and may get all right again. Give me another cigarette, he says. Perhaps we could do something together later on, Cat. I am very miserable. It is impossible that Cat, my friend, Cat with the drooping shoulders and the poor thin mustache, Cat whom I know as I know no other man, Cat with whom I have shared these years. It is impossible that perhaps I shall not see Cat again. In any case, give me your address at home, Cat, and here is mine. I'll write it down for you. I write his address in my pocketbook. How forlorn I am already, though he still sits there beside me. Couldn't I shoot myself quickly in the foot so as to be able to go with him? Suddenly, Cat gurgles and turns green and yellow. Let's go on, he stammers. Right, so Cat's Paul's honest-to-God last friend in the sport, and he just got hurt, so he's going to be sent away on an ambulance. Not an ambulance. He's going to be sent away on an army lorry and carried to a field hospital. Paul's going to be by himself in the front. Right? To survive this, he's had his friends have his back the whole time. It's going to be a lot harder to go out and fight when your friends aren't beside you. You lose a little bit of that willpower, that motivation. I jump up, eager to help him. I take him up and start off at a run, a slow, steady pace so as not to jolt his leg too much. My throat is parched. Everything dances red and black before my eyes. I stagger on doggedly and pitilessly and at last reach the dressing station. There I drop down on my knees, but have still enough strength to fall onto the side where Cat's sound leg is. After a few minutes, I straighten myself up again. My legs and my hands tremble. I have trouble in finding my water bottle to take a pull. My lips tremble as I try to think, but I smile. Cat is saved. After a while, I begin to sort out the confusion of voices that falls in my ears. You might have spared yourself that, says an orderly. I look up at him without comprehending. He points to Cat. He's stone dead. I do not understand him. He's been hit in the shin, I say. The orderly stands still. That as well. I turn round. My eyes are still dulled. The sweat breaks out on me again. It runs over to my eyelids. I wipe it away and peer at Cat. He lies still. Fainted, I say quickly. The orderly whistles softly. I know better than that. He's dead. I'll lay any money on that. I shake my head. Not possible. Only 10 minutes ago I was talking to him. He has fainted. Cat's hands are warm. I pass my hand under his shoulders in order to rub his temples with some tea. Feel my fingers become moist. I draw them away from behind his head. They are bloody. You see, the orderly whistles once more through his teeth. On the way, without my having noticed it, Cat had caught a splinter in the head. There's just one little hole. It must have been a very tiny stray splinter, but it has sufficed. Cat is dead. So right when the splinter, it's like shrapnel. It comes off of an explosion or something. It must have just hit him right in the back of the head while Paul was carrying him. Slowly I get up. Would you like to take his pay book and his things? The lance corporal asks me. I nod and he gives them to me. The orderly is mystified. You're not related, are you? No, we're not related. No, we're not related. Do I walk? Have my feet still? I raise my eyes, let them move around. I turn myself with them. One circle, and I stand in the mists. All is as usual. Only the militiaman Stanislaus Kaczynski has died. Then I know no more. End of 11. Alright, so it's sad. Paul's only connection, only other friend has just died.